Welcome to Necessary Roughness presented to you by Stadium Rant. This is the end of the season. We made it. Finally. Week 18 has finally closed. It feels like 84 years. I probably have six gray hairs by now, but we made it. I've got John, Nick with me. Chris couldn't be with us tonight. He's with family. And of course, your host, Meg Hall. Gentlemen, we've been rocking and rolling now for several weeks. I think we've been doing this since week 7, but now we're here week 18, and I feel like we've had some really good moments from this season. And I want to talk about those, but we'll talk about a couple other things. So we're going to talk about Black Monday. We will talk about those top moments from this season. We're going to talk about the playoffs, and then we will do our rapid fire pick'em, which will be with the wild card round. Let's start with this Black Monday. So this kicked off even before Black Monday. Texans fired Lovie Smith, and there's been a whole lot of chatter about that, about them going 2 years back to back with two different coaches. And now there's been a lot of chatter today, which I've seen from Texans fans about wondering what's the future of general manager Nick Caserio as well. John, what were your thoughts about this firing of Lovie Smith?
It could be a bad look from like a franchise or even like an ownership point of view, just for kind of your pitch to the next coach. With the having two in a row, 1 year when I don't know what your expectations really were with the roster that was put together. It's not like the Nathaniel Hackett firing, for example. It's not like he was given the keys to a solid roster that should be competing. I mean, the Texans were most people's pick for the number one overall pick at the start of the season, when they were projecting that kind of stuff out. So I don't understand necessarily if this wasn't sort of a thing where the initially it was kind of understood that it was going to be a short-term thing, which I have seen, to kind of like refute the other controversy over it. The Cully and Lovie Smith. It seems like Lovie Smith might have been kind of on that same page,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't make a ton of sense to me right away. But Lovey's a little bit older. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's a little more innocuous. Um, but I'm not a huge fan of. There's just kind of the way they've operated that way. Especially as you kind of get into the coaching carousel and you're looking for a long-term guy. How secure is he gonna feel coming into that role, and how likely are people going to want to take, especially when the the roster is still going to be a dumpster fire this time next year, or at the start of the season next year. The next coach isn't going to be coming into a very different situation necessarily. They might have their franchise quarterback in place, but it's still not going to be a good situation. So I don't think it's a great look, personally.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I was tweeting with a couple of folks today, and yeah, very much the consensus was like, hey, Lovey knew what it was when he signed up for it. There's also something that I was reading today as well, that like at one point in the hiring process, Lovey didn't even know he was a candidate for the job. Like he didn't even know that like he was in consideration. So that kind
Yeah.
of tells you about their hiring process. And I mentioned it to some Texans fans earlier in the week, but I was like, hey, to me, I would hope that you're wanting to be a bit more intentional than just these bridge coaches, right? Like there's two bridge coaches now. Because now you absolutely have to nail this third, selection that Caserio has had.
Mhm.
And in my mind, how long is a leash? I give a good example of Dan Campbell. Lions won 3 games before this season. Three. And Lions brass was really patient with Campbell, and look how their season turned out. Now it did
Yeah.
start rough because they were still building, but they were able to turn around. They were on a 6-game win streak at one point. They were eliminated from the playoffs, but they managed to take their division rival down with them on the way out the door. Like
Mhm.
that's inspired football.
Mhm.
And so I'm just wondering, like, how long is this leash for, the Texans franchise? Like, how do you expect anybody to thrive there without putting them in, a position to succeed?
Yeah, and when you think about the potential franchise quarterback, say they draft somebody this year, there's not going to be any existing culture or carryover infrastructure there at all. It's all going to be, a new thing for him to walk into, and it might not be a great situation for the quarterback for that reason as well. I think what you're seeing with Detroit is definitely the way to go when you're thinking about pivoting to that franchise quarterback and really taking the next step. They're going to be really, really primed for that, and everything around that guy, whomever it is, on his rookie contract is going to be a championship window the way it looks if they're able to build that roster around them, and that's a very different situation than Houston finds themselves in right now.
Yeah, yeah. So let's pivot as well. There's another interesting fire, if you will. The Arizona Cardinals. So they were relieved Cliff. Also, their general manager stepped down as well. Like, they've had a lot going on this season. They also, I think, also relieved 2 coaches throughout the season for various off the field instances. Let me say that. I'm curious, Nick. Like, what would make this head coach position for the Cardinals attractive to someone who is interviewing right now?
Yeah, I mean, this situation with Arizona and Houston, 2 teams that we talked about, I mean, it was all with that DeAndre Hopkins trade. Comes back to that where Bill O'Brien was fired over because he traded his franchise receiver, and all of a sudden, all the wheels come off, and Deshaun Watson doesn't want to be there anymore, and then everything happened with that. And then the situation in Arizona we thought would be like incredible because you got an elite, type, caliber quarterback, and then you add DeAndre Hopkins, and for so many of these young quarterbacks, when the wide receiver comes, when it was Diggs in Buffalo, and when it was now A.J. Brown in Philly, and all these different guys, Hill in Miami, it seemed to always work for them, but somehow it wasn't really working for Kyler this season. Obviously, Hopkins was out for a while, but even when he came back, Kyler was not really able to get that, that connection with him back. And now Kyler's torn his ACL, and he's not going to be back for, a torn ACL is usually a year type injury, and you don't even know how, quick he's going to be when he comes back. So when you ask the question, how attractive is this coaching job in Arizona? I wouldn't even say it really is that attractive, considering you have an offense that really sputtered this year. I think at one point we said on this podcast that, their offensive, their average offensive, yards per play was like 4 to 5, per pass. And it was just unbelievable to hear about that because, it used to be such a like high explosive type offense. I mean, they were undefeated for a good portion of last season, and they seemed so good offensively. And that was the stir that, that's what stirred the pot in Arizona. And now all of a sudden you're going to have a backup quarterback playing for the majority of the season. You're going to have a defense that doesn't really, obviously they lost now J.J. Watt, and they're not going to have that much, inspired football to play, especially with how good San Francisco is in that division. And obviously it's it's an honor and a privilege to be an NFL head coach, but in that type of situation, it's just not so much, of something that somebody, like Sean Payton or like a guy that would want to coach a elite type team would want to even, step their foot into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a tough situation. And just to this comment here, what are they going to do now? His coach is gone. There also talks today about the Cardinals, essentially trading away DeAndre Hopkins now, are looking to move on from him. Like, it's going to make it tough for them. They already, I don't think that you were getting the most out of DeAndre Hopkins, especially not what you gave up to get him. I would be very surprised what the Cardinals do in the offseason. They also need a new GM, and they've been interviewing. I saw, a couple of tweets today about like, hey, they're requesting interviews, but certainly they need someone who could come in and make over the roster. If you've watched any sort of parts of, Hard Knocks, you saw like they were a beaten down team, a very beaten down team. And they certainly need a coach who can come in and inspire and get them going again. I think Cliff was doing the best that he could, but certainly, obviously, it wasn't the expectations they had for the organization. So,
Well, Cliff got that job out of college with a sub 500 coaching record in college, and it was always sort of smoke and mirrors. It seemed like with just sort of the way they built the roster. The the way they played on offense. And, it went from November 2021, 7-0, extend everybody. This is great. Kingsbury extension, Steve Keim extension. But Kyler kind of won in the end. They're committed to Kyler. Obviously, he's season-ending IR. But DeAndre Hopkins, you think about his perspective, he leaves Houston. He finally goes to play with a franchise, or he goes to play with another franchise quarterback. He had all those years before Deshaun Watson, and now he doesn't want to play with whoever they end up rolling out there this season. He wants to probably go somewhere where he has a legitimate quarterback. He's going to be 31, I think.
Yep.
Kind of the back end of his prime. So you can't imagine he wants to, and probably in his eyes, waste a season with, kind of a bridge quarterback to get through the Kyler injury. So, I mean, I think his trade request is extremely valid. It makes sense. And the Kyler situation is something they kind of just have to wait on. I mean, it's tough to trade a guy when he's got an injury like that. And it's also when that extension is fresh, it's difficult to do so as well. So you're kind of on the Kyler train, I think, and that's sort of the only piece of the foundation. There are not many other young pieces that the new GM would probably see as a part of the next great Cardinals team.
Yeah, would agree. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. There was a couple more that came across. Let's talk Todd Downing. So from Titans. So he was also fired. Not only was he fired, it felt like the entire offensive staff was let go. You had 4 different positions that were relieved of their duties. Titans have been a hot mess express. They went down on a 7-game slide to end the season, and it feels like it just went all up in a blaze of glory, so to speak, for lack of a better phrase. Very far from the 7-3 record that they had to finish 7-10, which is just, when you say that out loud, is almost mind-boggling. But it was largely due to a few things. So injuries was a big one. They were the most injured team for 2 years in a row now. But the other thing was Todd Downing and his offense. I think you saw a really good example of that in week 18 of that Titans-Jags game. There's a play where Treylon Burks gets the ball, and you saw him lateral across the field in the middle of the play. And that was an intentional play. And it literally happened on the first drive. They had this big mammoth drive, 10 plays down the field, and it ended in a field goal. Mm-hmm. Because, that pass ended up being a backwards pass.
Well, and you
know how you defend things like that. Like, why? What is happening?
And I can see Ken and the whole offensive staff. Like, when Malik Willis came into the starting role, it was kind of one of those things where, like, hey, this could be kind of a catalyst for this team. Right. Maybe they start playing a little differently. It's the mobile quarterback coming in. Maybe he could really spark something. He's got a great arm. He can throw a great deep ball. But they didn't do any of that. They ran less than 6 quarterback runs per game. Zone, any type of zone reads, QB power, just any QB designed runs or options. They barely did any of that. Just like around the same amount as they did with Tannehill, essentially. And that just doesn't make any sense. Like it's something where you need to be able to identify your personnel, especially when it fluctuates at times, and adjust. And that offensive staff really didn't. They said, okay, come in, manage the game. We'll run with Derrick Henry, and you don't have the weapons to kind of buoy a young quarterback like that. So you have to lean into his athleticism, and they really didn't. It didn't make any sense. So, yeah. Burn it down. Vrabel will probably be the last man standing in that staff by the time next year.
I mean, yeah, they need a new GM as well. Remember, they fired their GM almost midseason, or a little past midseason, if you will.
Yeah, weird time. I think they were 7-5 at the time.
Yeah, so they had just lost 2 back-to-back games.
The Eagles lost.
Yeah, they lost to the Bengals. They lost to the Eagles, and in the Eagles game, that was a really big reflection of just how bad it was.
There's AJ Brown coming back and doing
Oh yeah, AJ Brown comes back to like wreck them, stuff of nightmares. Left tackle is looking, I mean, just abysmal. They can't move the football. Treylon Burks is the only like ray of hope there that is treading this Eagles defense. He ends up getting hurt, and else can really get any separation. I mean, it was just a walking dumpster fire, like in that game. And it was one of those where I think the owner, Amy Adams Strunk, her comment I thought was very telling. She said to the comment when I read it, she was like, why, basically why delay the inevitable? Like, why wait till the end of the season when you're going to let them go? Like, let them go now. So it tells me like this had been stewing for a while. And that game it's basically everything comes to feast in one game. And the Titans haven't been the same since. Even before then, when Downey got his DUI after the Green Bay game, I mean, they didn't win another game for the rest of the season. So it's like, I mean, it felt like that was this rolling snowball effect of really bad decisions for the Titans. And I feel for them because that offense, looking at it, you see a Derrick Henry and you're like, okay, yeah, great. This offense should be fine. Tannehill is serviceable. Of course, you got Treylon Burks. But outside of that, like, where are your wide receivers? Robert Woods is not getting separation. Nick Westbrook-Akina is not getting separation. Then you got Chiga Okonkwo, which are tight end. Like, that that was the other little ripple. Like, that was it. But they weren't getting as much as they needed to. And ultimately, it cost them. And even with Malik Willis at the helms, he just wasn't ready. He wasn't ready yet, and I think for them, like they've got some soul searching to do this offseason as well, at a couple different things: offensive coordinator, GM, what they're going to do at the quarterback position. Are they going to keep Tannehill? Are they going to roll with Dobbs? Until Malik Willis is ready. Lots of questions there the Titans have to answer. So there was one more that I wanted to talk about, and it was for the Commanders. So they fired their offensive coordinator, Scott Turner, and I saw something today, and I don't want to see if I can find it, but it said something like he had 8 different quarterbacks during his time with the Commanders, which is wild to me. I don't think that's even been talked about enough. So let me see if I can find it because I thought it was very interesting. Let's see. There it goes. Tom Pelissero tweeted out earlier. He said Washington started 8 different quarterbacks in Scott Turner's 3 seasons and had one of the NFL's worst O-lines in 2022. So a new OC incoming for Ron Rivera will have a lot of work to do.
3 seasons, 8 quarterbacks.
Yes.
Can we name them all?
I mean, I could think of obviously Howell and Heineke and Wentz. That's 3. And
that's all I got. I mean, let's see if I can. I might be able to search it really quickly. But
it's really hard. I mean, so he started in 2019. Is that? Oh, Alex Smith.
Yeah. Okay. But then that year, was it McCoy backing him up that year?
Oh, maybe. No, because that year when Alex Smith started, he got hurt, and then Heineke came in. I guess that was 2020, the COVID year when they had the playoff game.
Yeah.
So we have 5
there.
Boy, that's crazy though.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
I think I can find it now. So there it goes. Okay, so yeah, Sam Howell. Well, no, Kirk Cousins was before him, but at least Sam Howell, Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz. I mean, that's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's tough. That's tough to establish something with. Scott Turner, son of Norv Turner, head coach of the Chargers for a long time, OC, thereafter for a little while as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's a football guy. He'll probably get another job around the NFL. That's kind of a tough like 3-year resume to equate. Like how much of that really goes on the coordinator at a certain point. Especially when none of those 8 quarterbacks are very good. that he had.
Yeah, I want to ask this question. I think I know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Did Carson Wentz get someone else fired? Because I feel like I feel like this is like a recurring theme with him. Like anywhere he goes, somebody is bound to get fired for, being in the realm of him. Is this a situation where Carson Wentz has like gotten, Scott Turner fired?
Could be something like that. I mean, that was kind of the big. Well, how much of a hand did Scott Turner have in them going after Wentz in the first place? Because I'm sure you bring those guys into that conversation. Hey, what can we do with this guy? So maybe it was something like that. Maybe he was tethered to Wentz a little bit, with kind of how they viewed his value within the organization. Maybe it was something where, this is Wentz is his guy, and that didn't work out, so we're going to try something different.
Yeah, maybe that's why they went with Carson at the end of the season, because I was really confused about it because I thought Heineke was doing a good job. Obviously not a Super Bowl team, but I thought they could have made the playoffs. And then they went with Carson. I was like, you're going to go with a guy that hadn't played all season and really hasn't proved himself since his ACL tear in 2017. So maybe it does have to do with Scott Turner. Like they were like, all right, OC, this is your guy. Let's see what he does. And then he threw 3 picks, and it's like Carson's out, you're out, and then we're gonna have to just start from I think that might have had a impact.
I was really shocked that they went back to him because I thought that Taylor Heineke wasn't playing that bad. Like he'd given them a chance in several games. I just was really perplexed by it. Like that was his team. Like why? Like the most convincing win that they had all season was when they beat the Eagles, and that was on the heels of Taylor Heineke. Like that. I don't think you got better play than that out of Carson Wentz. So it just really bothered me that like they just were like, okay, well, all right, let's go back to him. Doesn't make sense.
I don't think there's any way that Wentz would have won that game. Really
No. I mean, we talked about it. I talked about it earlier in a space on Twitter earlier this week. Is like, what you're getting with Carson Wentz, right? Like you absolutely do. And I think now, and this is a question I had asked, was as a side note, like, hey, has Carson Wentz played his last game as a starter in this league? Which is a very viable question now. It doesn't work out with the Eagles, doesn't work out with Colts, doesn't work out with the Commanders. I mean, the only quarterback that is tied to the organization right now is Taylor Heineke. So I'd be curious to see what happens from here on out.
And it was a weird thing to go back to him on the last game of the season because they had a Week 14 bye. Yes. That they could have sat on that decision and changed going forward if they felt like that was going to give them a better shot. Coming off a Giants tie, going into Week 14 bye to play that same team again. Just a weird series of decisions there. So sure, fire the OC, try something different.
Yeah. They honestly need to go in a different direction anyway, because they've always been this like kind of in the middle of the road type team, and it's like you're not going to win a Super Bowl like that, and I feel like that is the end goal. So to just kind of stay in the middle with a backup to starting caliber quarterback and a decent defense with obviously some good playmakers there, Chase Young leading the pack, it's a good foundation. But at the end of the day, you want to be 12-5 and not 8-9. So I feel like they do, it's a good step to like maybe change some things about the franchise. I hope they continue to like move in that direction and try to better their team, because right now it seems like, well, maybe not now, but like, signing Carson, that wasn't ever going to be a move that put them over the top or anything like that. So.
And that's the crazy thing. Like Commanders fans were like adamant that this was like he was going to be the guy. Colts fans didn't know what they were talking about. The Colts didn't use him correctly, like these sorts of things. And I think like the Eagles knew it immediately. They were like, no, he's got to go. And I think they tried to tell the rest of the league like, no, we've seen the best already, and he still hasn't played up to that 2017 season since then. So. I'll be curious to see what they do there, especially for the Commanders as well on the offensive side of the ball. Like they've got some good weapons there that they certainly need someone who can come in and get the most out of them. So we'll see what happens there. Outside of that, there's been a bunch of GM movements right now. Lots of interviews going on, several different teams looking for GMs, and lots of pressers going on as well. Or at least I will say this in the AFC South from my end of the world. I've seen 2 in the last 2 days. I saw the Houston Texans, Nick Caserio presser, and then I watched Chris Ballard's presser today as well. And certainly, I would not be shocked to see some more scrutiny from GMs as well. lots of pressure right now to make the right decision as far as hiring offensive coordinators. And then, of course, lots of pressure right now to pick the right quarterback as well. So this should be a very fun, interesting offseason. But speaking of fun, I want to talk about the games from the season. So the season's done now, and we had some pretty wild games from this season, and I really want to start with these. And John, I'm going to start with you because your Vikings were in two of the games that I pulled out as, or we talked about as top games for the season. Let's start with a really fun one, Bills Vikings. And what did you see in this game that told you hey, Vikings were a playoff team? I could believe in Kirk we trust. What did you see out of that game that told you hey, I could believe in this version of this Vikings team?
This could be said about a few games of this season, of the Vikings season, but that game in particular was sort of a microcosm of the entire season. And the big takeaway from just an analyst perspective is just kind of fighting through adversity and coming back from because that entire game on both sides, Bills and Vikings, it was a calamity of errors down the stretch. It was a Murphy's Law second half and overtime if I've ever seen one. But the talent was that there was so much talent on the field too that it was just one roll of the football, one fumble on the goal line. There were so many things. There was a 12 men on the field at one point that didn't get called. And it was just nuts. But obviously there was the Justin Jefferson catch in this game, which was
the
emotional crescendo for me. But even kind of after that, there were, I think it was probably 6 or 7 drives in a row where, at least personally, I was standing up because it was so just a nail biting down the stretch. But this one is probably my favorite of the year, even
more than Colts Vikings.
I'm talking about Colts Vikings, but I like this one better. It was legit competition, obviously. And it was a game.
Legit competition. Thanks, John. Thanks.
Just a sneak dig. It was, but it was a game too that they came into that nobody expected him to win, and it got really crazy, and it was just about as Vikings as it can get. So I love that game. Obviously we came out on top, but it really could have gone either way, and it was just the most fun I've had watching a game so far this year. So.
Yeah, I remember messaging the two of you are you breathing? Are you all right in this game?
Yeah, I remember that.
Nick couldn't even talk about it.
Yeah, that was just a tough one. But at the same time, at the end of it, I did acknowledge how incredible that game was. I sat there and I was like, you know what though? That was pretty incredible. We don't see that every week. We don't see that every year. And we were up 27-10, and Kirk looked lost when he went back. I think he got picked off, and he went back to the sideline. And I was like, Kirk O'Chains is not having a good time.
That one to Benford was just
yeah. I was like, he's not having fun right now in Buffalo. And then I was like, wait a minute, why'd Dalvin just score on an 85-yard touchdown? I was like, wait a minute, why'd Josh throw a pick in the end zone? And I was like, this is not good. And then all of a sudden, whatever happened, happened. I don't really remember it. It was a long time ago. But we're over it. We're over it. But it was a good win for the Vikings.
I can refresh your memory. Buffalo mishandled the snap and fumbled the football. The Vikings defense would capitalize by scoring on a 1-yard fumble return.
Right.
That gave Minnesota a 30-27 lead with 41 seconds left on the game clock.
Yeah.
Missed the extra point there to
I do remember
making it 31-27.
I do remember us coming back down and getting a field goal back, and then we.
Yes.
Yeah, and you didn't need a touchdown because of the missed extra point. It was just such a.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, 69-yard drive in 39 seconds, I think, to get the field goal there.
Yeah.
That was inevitable.
And that was an injured Josh Allen. He had a UCL.
I was going to say Josh Allen was injured.
He was basically hurt.
We were wondering what was happening with him. What's wrong with him? Is his elbow okay? Is it not okay? There was all this speculation up until the game. Is he even gonna play?
Right.
We thought we were getting Case
I thought it
Keenum.
was Case Keenum. Yeah, all week.
That would have been fun. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Case Keenum could have provided that sort of, game, but it would have been fun to watch.
Yeah.
All right, so there's another one on here. Colts Vikings. Oh. I had to put it on here as one of the top games of the year, just for the sheer fact of it broke, an all-time NFL record for amount of points scored in the second half of the game. Only the Colts could have something like this happen to them. We talk about all the time how they have a knack for making people look better than they actually are when it comes to players, and this is not a slight to KJ Osborne at all. But it made him look like this godlike wide receiver. And I mean, even Justin Jefferson was like, wait a second, hold on. You're not going to be doing all this. I'm going to join the party too. I'm going to do what I normally do.
Let me hit this double return route on the goal line and make a highlight real quick.
Yes. Out of Stephon Gilmore. Yes. Thank you for the reminder. I remember.
I think my trauma, you can go through yours, and then John's just up there smiling at us.
John's just laughing at both of us.
We don't lose close ones. There are no good games the Vikings lost.
I mean, I'll say this. I remember being on the couch watching this game. I think I told you guys this. I sat in that same spot watching the Ravens game from 2021 season. Colts gave up a 19-point lead in that game. Ooh, yeah. And I told myself immediately after that game, I was like, I will never sit in this same spot on my love seat ever again to watch any sort of game. I've now had my heart ripped out twice in back-to-back seasons. I quit. So, but I do think that game was a lot about the Vikings' resiliency. Let me say that, because the sky was falling in the first half. You got a pick six, fumbles. Colts are, basically scoring. I won't say at will, but fairly easily. Scoring. Touchdown. Yes, it was a block, and all kinds of good things were happening. Things like end arounds, things like offense moving, things that I've been asking for all season for the Colts to do. It just, Nick, were you gonna say something?
I was just thinking, yes, it did completely show the resiliency in both of those games. Yep. And it is a reason why a lot of people aren't picking them to I've seen people not even pick them to win the first game, but it is a reason why I am I have some hope for them to definitely I have, as we'll go into our picks, but I haven't beaten the Giants. And then whoever they play in the second round, I do have some confidence that they'd have a good chance in that second game. And then you never know what happens after that, just because if they go down, the game's not over at all. There's so many teams in this league that can't really battle through adversity. And Minnesota's shown that if the game is close, even if they go down by 10, 17, 33, we don't really know. But if the game is close, they have a good chance of pulling it out, just because they've done it so many times this season. And I've been impressed by them all year, because I took them to go into the playoffs. Preseason, but I took them as a wild card, and I took them as I think 9 or 10 win team to win 12 games. And at one point they were the, number 1 seed in the NFC. It was definitely a good season. And I don't think by any means they're done or a fraud team. I think they're pretty damn good. And I think they'll have a good chance here in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say this. I would say the one area where I might be curious about the Vikings is their defense. If they get into a back and forth match, obviously we've seen that they can hang, but will they be able to shut out a team, or will they be able to win a game from the defensive side of the ball? I don't know that yet. I'm not 100% sure. I think they've relied heavily on their offense to get them down the field, get those really quick scoring drives, which you're saying they can score in the blink of an eye. Yeah. But if it's put on the defense, would they be able to win a game? That's where I would be curious if you're going to play complementary football. So there is a comment that I thought was really cool. Michael said, I had to wade through the floods of California to get here, but I'm here. I hope you're all right. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for joining. We appreciate you. All right. So that was a really good game. There's a couple more that I want to get through. So Ravens Dolphins, if anybody remembers this game, this was a wild game. And I think we talked about this game earlier in the season, but we talked about this right before the show started. And Nick, you made a good comment that I thought was very interesting. That like this was the game that showed us that like Tua might be legit, or it started that conversation about Tua being legit.
Yeah.
Like obviously we know now that he's dealt with a number of injuries, but what are your thoughts now since that game?
Yeah, that was not only the game that Tua showed that he was, legit, because everybody saw when they, obviously acquired Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek was, talking Tua up so much, and it was like, really? Because we really haven't seen that out of him. So the fact that you're saying, oh, he's more accurate than Pat Mahomes, he's better than Pat, he's the best quarterback I've ever seen. And everybody was like, really? Like, obviously, like, that's your guy now, so you're going to say that. And then we saw this game, and we were like, he might have not been lying. Like, in camp and in preseason, like, he looked really, really dynamic and making all these long throws, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek, and it was just incredible to watch. It, like, reminded me of a Chiefs game. But obviously not, as I said, not only was that Tua's coming out game, it was also the game where we learned that Baltimore couldn't hold leads. And it just started like a complete sputtering of their defense late in games, where they continued to blow 10-point leads at home. And it was like, what is going on with Baltimore's defense? Obviously, then they acquire Roquan Smith. But yeah, I feel like that was such a tale of both like AFC teams that, we expected one to be better than the other. And then Miami like really just surprised everybody by making incredible plays. And I thought that was an awesome game because I really didn't expect them to come back. So yeah, it was a fun one for sure.
Yeah, I was I remember watching that game, and I'm not even gonna lie to you, I turned it off at one point. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, the Ravens are dismantling the Dolphins. Like, this is not going anywhere I thought it was gonna be, because I thought it was a really good like QB matchup. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then all of a sudden, like, I start seeing like notifications going off. My husband's like screaming downstairs. I mean, he's like going crazy, and he's like, you gotta come watch this game. And watching the Dolphins like come all the way back. And I'll say this, shout out to my ladies fantasy football league. We have a Dolphins fan in there, and she has been talking about Tua and the Dolphins all off season. And so this game, I felt like started to validate some of the things that she was saying, because I think Dolphins fans were feeling a bit, I don't know, maybe disrespected about all the things that was being said about Tua, him not, being a viable quarterback, their team, we're going to see what happens, will Tyreek Hill look like Tyreek Hill? But this game was a start of all that. Like, this was like, oh no, the Dolphins they're legit. They had plenty to say after that game. And if you're the Ravens, like, this is where the questions start. Like, is this even going to be the season that we thought it was going to be? Ravens fans were also frustrated because they had just come off of, lots of injuries the season before and the season before that. They got Lamar back. Like, they're wanting, they're wanting more from their team. Defense had been looking shaky for a couple of weeks. Like, this was a very, very good game. It was a wild game, though. Wild game to watch in real time.
And first year head coach and offensive play caller, Mike McDaniel, was only his second game. So you kind of got to see a lot of how he was going to open that offense up. And that was sort of a coming out party for him as well, I felt like. Yeah.
There is a comment from Michael. He says, as a firm Tua, a non-believer. Oh my gosh, I've never even heard that. I know Tua can be really good, although I clowned him after the Green Bay game. He just needs to avoid the NFL's we don't talk about it injury. Yeah, I mean, I think for Tua, like, he's got to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. And I know that, over the last couple of weeks, there's been lots of talk about keeping Tua healthy, and I think the Dolphins need to continue to do that. We saw earlier in the season that the concussion protocols were revised now to include some no-go symptoms and like, hey, absolutely not, like, you're coming out of the game. If I'm the Dolphins, I would be concerned about the long-term health of Tua. And certainly from a Dolphins fan perspective, like they certainly won't need to be concerned about, what's happening here. But I think if Tua stays healthy, like, this is a much different, Dolphins team if he's around to guide them through the rest of the season.
I personally don't think he's going to be playing on Sunday, just because, I mean, he's only in like step 3 of the 5-step protocol for concussions, and he's gotten it. No, obviously he's only been in protocol twice, but we know that he's had 3 of them all season. And yeah, I mean, as a fan, as a Miami Dolphin fan, I'm sure that they would want him to, somehow, get through that and play. But as like a life fan, like a fan of his life and his family, I don't think they want him on that football field, especially because it's such a hostile environment in Buffalo. They need to win. They're playing for DeMar, and it's just like I feel like that's not a good environment for him to like come back into. So I personally don't know. I don't know if he's going to play. I just don't think he should, just because of the effects that could happen, after his career.
Yeah, very much so. All right, one last game. So we talked about Ravens, Dolphins, Vikings, Bills, Colts, Vikings. There was another one that I think is earth-shattering. The Raiders-Pats game, where Mac Jones gets like basically stiff-armed into oblivion. This also I felt like was one of the top games of the year because the Raiders were absolutely hosing the Patriots for much of this game, like completely much of this game. Patriots come storming back and you're like, okay, great. We're going to overtime. Fantastic. Wonderful. And then instead of either kneeling the ball out or just running, taking a knee somewhere, running to slide, take a knee, there's a lateral. And then there's another lateral.
And the second lateral is kind of just a throw.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I did not know what was going on in this like less than 30-second happening or whatever else. In my mind, I was like, did he just throw it? Did they just throw it again? Like, it was like, what just happened? And next thing I know, like, you can't see Chandler Jones in the frame, but you see the ball like gently kind of glide across the field, and it comes down, and you see Chandler Jones just absolutely like manhandle Mac Jones and take off running the other way. I oh my goodness, this is a good quote. Good comment. It says Chandler Jones fully adopted Mac Jones as his son in that game. You would be correct, sir. Yes, you would be correct.
Mm-hmm. Same surname.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That was a game. It was a wild. I don't think I've ever seen a game end that way in all of my life and all the time I've been watching football games. John, what did you think watching that play live?
I just saw a comment that's exactly what I was thinking. The first thing I thought about was Bill Belichick. Was inside Bill Belichick's head.
Yeah.
Just alarm bells ringing and just, train whistle, steam coming out of his ears, the whole thing. Like, he had to have been livid, because that was just one of those. It was one of those type of plays that the Patriots were always smart about. Like, they never made. Like that's why the weird 4th and 2 against the Colts was so overblown, because that wasn't like a Belichick play. It wasn't a paid, they don't do stuff like that. And this was just such a boneheaded thing to see from a member of a Bill Belichick team that like that's all I could think about was just how pissed Bill Belichick had to be about it. But it was absolutely insane. I as it was happening, I had no idea what was going on. And it was a pretty clean interception of that lateral as well. And then, the Mac Jones thing was just pretty inexcusable. Like, Mac Jones isn't even like a small guy.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, that was the worst. That was like the worst thing I've ever seen. was Mac Jones just getting sunned like that. Like, that was just a bad look. And then Belichick had to be pissed about that too,
Yeah. There was
you watch everybody else tackle in practice all week. You can't. Yeah.
He must have been so mad, especially because if they win that game, they would have made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was the game that basically eliminated from the playoffs.
That's awesome, dude.
I mean, in hindsight now, that is a very poignant comment, because there's a picture as well after Mac Jones had got stiff arm where he's sitting on the field. He's literally sitting with his like legs crossed, and he's sitting there like what the hell just happened.
It wasn't
And in
his
the back of them, the Raiders are like going crazy. Fans are going. I mean, it's a crazy photo that like someone snapped that is just so like just a microcosm of the Patriots like season so far. It's been highly underwhelming if you're a Patriots fan, and
Well,
very
he was probably
frustrating.
as confused as us. Like he was,
Yeah.
he was probably so shocked the ball came that way that he wasn't even ready for the tackle. But still, yeah, no, that was probably the worst play there's ever been.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Michael said, "Hey Mac, Tom wouldn't have let Chandler Jones do that." I don't think that he would have done that to Tom Brady. I don't think so. They would have called the flag. They would have thrown some sort of, unnecessary roughness flag, roughing the passer, something like that. They would have called something.
No, the thing about Tom Brady is that he's obviously also not in the best of physical condition, but he actually threw some blocks sometimes. And
Sometimes,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like he's such a competitor that he definitely would have made it like some kind of wrap up right there of Chandler Jones. He would have done all he could. Mac Jones just got sunned. Like there's no other way to say it. Tom Brady would have made some kind of effort. Mac didn't do anything. He was just shocked. So yeah, probably not. Probably wouldn't have happened to Brady.
Yeah. All right. So those are 4 games that we had from the year. Is there any other ones that you think that we might have skipped over that could get an honorable mention for top games of the year? Oh, if you're talking, John, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Bills Chiefs was good. Chargers Chiefs was good.
Oh, yeah.
This is the second one.
Yep.
The Raiders Chiefs game was good. Where I think the one in Kansas City, that was a good one.
Yeah, pretty good. There was, I don't know if this is good, but more shocking. But might be when we knew the Giants might be more legit. Was Giants Titans first week?
Yeah.
Brian Daboll has Giants playing extremely well, all things considered. Their last several seasons, I thought that was a really good game.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
all right.
To win, it's always cool.
Oh, that's a good one. Detroit Seahawks. Yes, that was a good one.
I think, right? Also, 48-45. If the Lions won that game, they would have been in the playoffs. So that was
yes. There's another game. Lions and someone else. Was it Lions Vikings? There might be another game where
that one was fine. The first one.
There's a lot
when they beat us, it wasn't a good game.
Yes, that game. Yeah, okay. All right.
Some good Lions games this year for sure.
Yeah, so let us know in the comments if you think that there are some other games that we might have missed. Someone brought up Detroit Seahawks, which we just mentioned. But if there are any other good games that we missed, let us know in the comments. We'll read those comments out. All right, so now we've come to the playoffs. So this is WildCard weekend. I want to make sure that I get this right. There's a lot going on here. I'm gonna just hop right into these matchups, and then we can break them down just a little bit. But first up, we've got Dolphins, Bills. We've got Ravens, Bengals, Chargers, Jags, and then on the other side of the house, you've got Seahawks, 49ers. You've got Giants, Vikings, and then Cowboys, Bucks. So some really, really good matchups going on. Some very good QB matchups going on, especially for the 2020 draft class. Quite a few in here. You got Herbert, Hurts, Tua is there, and Joe Burrow, of course. So 2020 draft class is showing out a little bit. So this is really good matchups here. Any initial thoughts on these playoffs? And Nick, I see your eyebrow went up just a little bit. What you got for me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested. I'm very interested in this Chargers Jags game. Really am. I just think that both of these guys have never been. I mean, most of these quarterbacks have never been in the playoffs. But a lot of people are trusting the Chargers a lot more, just because of them having. I mean, I think that people generally think that Herbert's a better quarterback right now than Trevor Lawrence is. But I feel like a lot of people think. I mean, it feels like the Chargers have been in the playoffs just because they've been in these big games, but they've never actually gotten there. Like that Raiders game last season in Las Vegas, where that was just one of the best games I've ever seen, where Herbert kept making throw after throw. And it feels like he's been in those big situations where Trevor, that last game against Tennessee, it didn't really impress me. Like Josh Allen and I mean, Jags, Josh Allen, and Jenkins had to like seal that with like obviously the defensive touchdown, and I feel like he didn't do what he needed to really get them that win. So I feel like even though he's like made this really big leap, I feel like a lot of people are taking the Chargers and Justin Herbert. But I'm really interested to see if Trevor can like pull out some kind of awesome game. And obviously they've had a really good year after starting I think 1-7. So I think that's the one I'm going to be watching the most, just because that's a great quarterback matchup and of two guys that haven't ever been in the playoffs. So
yeah, I think it's very interesting. So obviously covering the AFC South, I've seen quite a bit of the Jags over the last couple of weeks, and I'll say this: I'm thankful that they won the AFC South over the Titans. I love Titans fans, but they've been a bit much over the last like couple of off seasons. So, but on a serious note, though, I think for the game that you were mentioning for that Week 18 game, like you saw Trevor miss a couple of throws he's gonna want back. There was a touchdown to Zay Jones that he's wide open, he missed him. And I think that that was just a microcosm of like, hey, there was some questions about his accuracy, which I think there's always been questions there. But as far as I think Trevor playing lights out, he's been doing that since Week 9. Like the Jags don't even get on this 6-1 streak to end the season without the play of Trevor Lawrence, and I think that's highly underrated here. I think on the other side of the house, on Herbert's side, like you have to give him credit for continuing to play through just the sheer amount of injuries that they had. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I thought they were dead in the water in that Kansas City game because they were just losing guys left and right. They had lost them, before the first game, like they had lost, guys and whatnot. So to continue battling through that, I think this is a really good matchup. But I do think that this, if Chargers don't win this game, I think this puts Staley on the hot seat. Because I think he was already teetering there as it was. You got to beat a lowly Colts team to get in. And which, by the way, they weren't playing like this phenomenal like game against the Colts. It was more so the Colts just beat themselves. So I feel like the Chargers kind of stumbled their way into the playoffs, whereas the Jags like convincingly went there. So we'll be curious to see about that matchup. John, is there any that like intrigue you? I know Nick named his. What's one that intrigues you?
Tom Brady's 7-0 against the Cowboys in his career.
Wow. Of course you would know that. Of course. He's been dropping Tom Brady knowledge for like 5 weeks now, just slyly like dropping it there.
Just don't cut him out.
Listen, if Tom Brady wins this weekend, like we're not inviting you on the show. Like we won't even. It'll just be Nick and I and Chris, and we'll just hold it down. Like we'll leave you to comment to the comments, because I just know it's going to be obnoxious. I just know. All right, so that is a really good matchup, though.
The Cowboys defense has performed significantly worse on grass this year.
It's also performed significantly worse over the last few weeks, by the way.
There's grass at Raymond James Stadium.
Yes.
There's a couple anecdotes for that game.
Thank you, John. I just know that this is the type of research that you're doing, like before the show. Like, what is the Cowboys' record on grass? Like those sorts of, just so that you can like add that in.
It's like a tennis question. Like, what is Nadal on that? Like, it's like, honestly, who cares?
Like, I just know that is John. He's literally, oh yeah, I knew that. All right, great. Gonna put that in.
Lock it away.
Yeah. Future reference.
Oh my gosh. All right, so let's do it. Let's do our rapid fire pick 'em. We're gonna do wild card weekend. We will actually start with Seahawks at 49ers. This is Saturday. This is the 4:30 game. Nick, who do you have in this one?
I just saw Pete Carroll have his presser. It was an amazing comment that he made. He goes, "Yeah, I'm really proud of this team for making the playoffs. Unfortunately, we're playing the Niners." It's just such a great comment because he knows what's coming. It's the storm of San Fran, and my Super Bowl pick from the NFC is going to obviously win this game.
Okay, all right, John, who do you have?
Yeah, I hope it's a good game. The Niners should steamroll them, and I mean it's. I don't see it playing out much differently than the last time they met 3 weeks ago. I don't see Brock Purdy making any big mistakes. That's the only way I could see it really swinging the other way. I think Shanahan and the guys are going to keep him well within structure, and the defense is going to wreak some havoc. So Niners probably by a significant margin, but hopefully it's a good game. Division matchup should be pretty interesting anyway.
Yeah, I've got San Francisco all the way. I think that the Seahawks have done way better than we thought they would, certainly behind the play of Geno Smith. But I just don't think they have enough to keep up with San Francisco. That defense is just lethal, and they're at home too. Yeah, give me the Niners all the way. All right, 8:15 game. This is Chargers at Jags. So Nick, you just spoke about this one. Who do you got in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I've been going back and forth all day, and ever since it came out, it's such a good, interesting, intriguing matchup for me. Because I don't know, but I do, just in the light of I want to see Chiefs Chargers more than Chiefs Jags. I'm gonna go with the Chargers because I think they have a better chance of beating them. So I'm gonna go with the Chargers. It's really good though.
Okay, all right, John, who do you got?
They're down in Duval County.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go Jags. I think it's going to be a cardiac event for sure. I think it's going to be down to the wire. I think we'll see some fireworks, especially late in the game with these two quarterbacks, but hopefully. I think I'm going to go Jags. I like the way that their defense has been playing. The pass rush looks really good. Tyson Campbell at cornerbacks looked really, really good. And, I think they're just going to be able to make enough plays on defense. I think that's where the difference is going to be. We've seen Staley kind of turn it on from a defensive play calling standpoint recently. They've got playmakers, Asante Samuel. Michael Davis has been incredible in man coverage recently, but I think I'm going to go Jags just by a hair. The more you think about it, the more you want to say tie. But look,
tie.
It's going to be a good game.
Hey, no more ties. No more ties.
Please, no more ties. No more ties.
If it was more than a one-score game.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going Jags at home. I believe in what they're putting together. I think Trevor Lawrence has played very well. I think they're playing pretty complimentary football right now. Now, the thing is, to your point about the defense showing up, there have been lots of times this season where the defense has gotten itself, in that bend, don't break sort of mode. And they've broken a few times, and Trevor Lawrence had to step up and take a hold of that game. So I would be curious to see what this defense does. But I also think the key to the game actually will be Travis Etienne, get him going early and often, and take a little bit of pressure off of Trevor Lawrence having to play, superhero. Give me the Jags at home and to continue.
They're the hotter team.
They are.
The thing about the last three teams they played is Jets, and then they played the Titans, and then they played the Texans. Those were the last three teams that they played.
Red hot.
Yeah, their defenses look good, but we kind of see why. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, yes, but I think for them it's more about they're playing solid football. They were 3-7 and they ended their season 6-1. That's Doug Peterson right there. I mean, he's made Evan Ingram look like we thought Evan Ingram should look like.
Looking like the 14th pick.
Looks great in that offense. You have to give, and he's doing what Urban Meyer couldn't do, which is get the most out of Trevor Lawrence. Shameless plug. I did write an article on this as well. StadiumRant.com/NFL. Click on the Jags. You'll see my article about how the Jags won the AFC South. Yeah. But I think that it'll be a good game. Well, this is a good comment. It says Eckler will be a factor too. Yeah. Can the Jags stop Austin Eckler? Good comment. Fair comment as well. All right, let's keep going. All right, so this is Sunday game. So this is Miami at Bills. I'm going to start this one. I got the Bills. I don't think Miami has enough. And if Tua doesn't play and you're talking about starting either Skyler or Teddy, good luck. And Bills at home. So. Yeah,
Bills. I have very, very few comments. I think.
Yeah, we know you're picking the Bills, Nick. We don't even ask.
Yeah. I mean, Skylar Thompson, Teddy. I hope it's not Tua just for himself, but if it is Tua, I don't want to see another injury. So yeah, I mean, I got us. We're playing for number 3. So I got us.
Yes, all for three. That's where I'm at. And side note, shout out to Nyheim Hines for his 2 kickoff return touchdowns. That is what the man does. And I knew once that he got into space, like he was going to be gone. But to see it twice, I was like, wow.
The second one, it looked like the Patriots weren't on the field, by the way. Where the hell were they? Like, the first one was good.
Yeah, I did read a comment that DeMar set off like every alarm in the ICU because he was jumping up and down and screaming watching this game, which that's awesome. That's so awesome to hear. And we're just thrilled to see that he has been released from Cincinnati Health. He's now back in Buffalo, which is great. Still has some tests to run through, but doing wonderful. And I think the Bills will continue to play for him. So, all right. So Giants at Minnesota. John, I know that you're taking Minnesota. I won't ask, but Nick, who do you have in this matchup?
Yeah. As I said earlier, I'm taking the Vikings. I like them. I like that, that resiliency, and I think the Giants don't blow anybody out. I think that they haven't blown out a team all year except they just blew out the Colts. Yeah, okay, so they did that, but the Colts are obviously spiraling downward. They didn't even want to win the game. So in a playoff atmosphere on the road, and this is Daniel Jones' first playoff game. A lot of these Giants players, probably a lot of them, their first playoff game. I don't think they're going to blow anybody out, and since that is going to happen, the Vikings are going to keep it close, and they're either going to blow them out or it's going to be close, and the Vikings are going to pull it out because that's what they do. So I got the Vikings.
Okay, yeah, I got Vikings as well. I don't think the Giants have enough to keep up with the Vikings at the end, and there's probably going to be too much Justin Jefferson. Way too much Justin Jefferson.
Something to worry about a little bit. Vikings offensive line is really beat up. Pro Bowl right tackle Brian O'Neill out for the season. Some question marks around center Garrett Bradbury. So that could be. Giants pass rush is fine. Their defensive front's pretty good. Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau off the edge obviously could be a problem for probably Oli Udoh at right tackle, who doesn't contend well with speed. He's sort of just a big guy, big not terribly athletic. So that could be a nightmare matchup. How the Vikings adjust to that, we'll see. Hopefully they have a plan in place. They have had a lot of time to kind of digest not having Brian O'Neill for the rest of the year. Yeah. But that's one thing to keep an eye on. I do think the Vikings will pull it out, though.
Okay. All right, let's go. We got 2 more. So Ravens at Bengals. Nick, who do you have in this one?
Yeah, I can't wait to hear if Lamar plays because I really hope he will because I really want to see a good game. Obviously, we just saw him last week, and I don't know when we're going to find out where the game is. Obviously, we can do that coin toss, but I don't really think it matters. I think Cincinnati's on a roll. I think they're one of the hottest teams in football, and I'm going to go with the Bengals. Joe really wants to get back to that championship game in the Super Bowl, so he's going to definitely take care of Baltimore again.
Yeah, John, are you going with Bengals as well?
Who dey?
Yeah. I figured as much. I also got Bengals. I think the Ravens. Oh boy, I feel like they've kind of skid into the playoffs here, and I think the health of Lamar is something to be concerned about. As well as the Ravens' offense hasn't looked that great in the last several weeks. They've been very up and down. Whereas again, Bengals have been that trending up team. They've looked great. Going to the playoffs. So I got the Bengals.
And even if he is healthy, the Bengals are so great stopping the run when they need to, especially when they're scheming around Lamar Jackson. Even DJ Reader, BJ Hill, Sam Hubbard, and those linebackers Wilson and Pratt have been so good. So they match up well with the strengths of the Ravens. And then you force them to throw. They've got a great secondary on the back end too. Roquan Smith just got 5 years, $100 million.
Yeah, and he did that himself.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he
negotiated that himself, which is crazy.
That's crazy
to me. Yeah, he's now the highest paid off-ball linebacker in the NFL. So
and he should have set the market. That's well deserved. But speaking of, yeah, no, I think we're gonna go Bengals there as well. It's just a good matchup for them, frankly.
We just saw it last week.
Yeah, it just is. So
yeah. All right. Last one is Cowboys at Tampa Bay. John, I already know that you're taking Tampa Bay for Tom Brady. Tampa Bay, as people like to call it. Nick, who do you have?
Yeah, I'm gonna surprise you, Meg, because I was like so shocked about what he was talking about earlier, and then all of a sudden it kind of like caught me, and I was like, wait a minute. The Cowboys have been playing really poorly at the end of the season, and it's not as if they like rested starters against Washington, unless I was unaware of it, because they just didn't play well, and Tampa's kind of found some kind of identity. I really was impressed with that game against Carolina, where he was able to hit Evans. So like I think he was over 200 yards in that game. That's the Tampa Bay Buccaneer team that we've been accustomed to over the last few years when Tom has been there. And just home game. I think all NFC teams were afraid of this all year, that they were going to have to probably go to Tampa, even though they were going to have like an 8-9 record. So I'm going with Tampa Bay. I think they move on. Dallas, Stephen A. says, what can go wrong will go wrong. So I'm gonna have to ride on that one.
Yeah, I have Tampa Bay as well. As ugly as as that is, I was really hoping to pick Dallas, but they have not looked great. And yeah, you're right. I had to double check that like Dak was even playing in that Commanders game, because that was just I was not expecting that. But I've been saying it since they played the Colts, that they look shaky and things like that. Like, again, I will say it till I'm blue in the face. Like, no one realized that it was 21-19 going into the fourth quarter, and they looked very shaky up and down after that. The Colts just did Colts things. But the point being is that they should have, before that point, they should have been easily dismantling us. And they haven't looked great. They also let Gardner Minshew take them to the brink, which is crazy to me. So yeah, I think for Dallas, unfortunately, I think this narrative is going to continue of them, not being able to get back to a Super Bowl, get into the playoffs and being one and done. Like, they are not looking the way that they looked at the beginning of the season, where you were very much convinced, like, hey, this was a different Dallas team. They're going to be better. Those old habits tend to die hard. I think they're coming back to them. So
I do think, though, I could see it going the other way. I do trust Tom a little bit more right now, and I trust the playoff game plan defensively of Todd Bowles against this Dallas team. But I think the way we've talked about in past weeks on the show about these light boxes that Dallas lives with, sub 300 D tackles, these more penetrating 3-tech type, really light edges.
Yeah.
The Bucks are one of the worst rushing teams in the history of the league. They're not a team that's going to be able to punch a light front like this in the mouth and win that way. So when you are kind of a speed oriented defense, you want them to spread you out and throw. You probably want to play the team that's had the most passing attempts in the history of the league in a season. So I think it's a good matchup for both defenses, but I think it's Tom Brady is sort of what's gonna decide it. It just feels like he's kind of on a little bit. But I think the defenses are gonna look good. I could see this being an ugly like 19-16 game or something like that.
Yeah, he's gonna do all that just so he can go play for the Raiders. But all right, I digress. All right, so that was the end of our WildCard selections and games. So this should be a very good weekend. We will see what happens here with these games. Be curious to see what our thoughts are next week once we watch these games. All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. I appreciate anyone who's watching, anybody who's commented, of course. Make sure that you like this video, share it, subscribe, hit the bell so that you get our notifications for not only our show when we go live, but also our other lineup of shows for Stadium Rant. We've got Another Damn Fantasy Podcast, Rumbles of Red, which focuses on daily fantasy sports. You've got The Bounce, which is your basketball show. And now we even have a gambling show. So Gritty Gambler's Guide is brand new. It comes on Monday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Please be sure to check that out as well. And of course, you can find all of our content on stadiumrant.com for not only your team, but the rest of the NFL. And of course, we do some other things too, like, baseball, soccer, all those kinds of sports that, they're not as great as football, but, they matter. All right. And
people like
Before I forget, you can also go on Spotify as well and look up NFL on Stadium Rant podcast for all of your team content. And as always, there are no flags here, but the comments are always necessary. We will see you after a wild card weekend. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.